Hello, Internet. Mike Byrne here from MMOBomb.com, bringing you our top 10 free-to-play news stories of 2020 in video form. For those of you that did want to read Jason's article that is expertly written over on the site. So we figured we'd put it all together in a video for you as well. Now, considering everything else that happened in the world this year, the gaming industry got by relatively unscathed. A new focus on digital products made working remotely easier than for other industries, and our consumption of those products actually increased over some periods thanks to one unfortunate lockdown after another, which does kind of make you wonder what we would have done 20 or 30 years ago before Steam and Netflix and two-day delivery. But thankfully, we now have a wide variety of stay-at-home entertainment to keep us occupied, and just like in any other year, the people creating those options made both good and bad news. Games were announced, launched, delayed, and sometimes canceled before this year and will be after. So here are our picks for the top 10 newsmakers in the free-to-play world for 2020. Number 10. Many free-to-play games that have been around for a while jump over to Steam. Now, for some reason, 2020 was the year that a bunch of long-running games, notably already free-to-play ones, announced a move to Steam. At first, it was kind of a joke. This Steam doesn't get enough new releases. Now it's getting 20-year-old games. But as the year progressed, it became less of a joke and more of a trend. RuneScape, which I mentioned earlier, being the 20-year-old game, made its Steam debut in October and was bookended by a pair of EA's free-to-play games in Star Wars: The Old Republic in July and Apex Legends making the move to Steam in November, among other titles in the big EA library that did also make the jump from Origin to Steam. Guild Wars 2 was going to join the Steam party in 2020, but delays forced its transition into next year. Now, why would so many standalone titles suddenly want to go to Steam and give up 30% of their revenue? Well, the simplest answer is to say that those games aren't doing as well as they used to financially, and they need to find new customers to generate more revenue. That's judged to be worth getting less money per player, even if some current users switch to using Steam. If these games prove successful on their new platforms, and it seems they are for the most part, don't be surprised if we get some more older games making that leap in 2021. Number 9. Rocket League goes free-to-play. One of the biggest sensations over the past few years has been Psyonix's soccer with cars game Rocket League. It was originally designed, actually, with free-to-play in mind, but launched in 2015 as a buy-to-play game. Last year, Jason actually predicted that it seemed like the perfect time for the game to go free-to-play in 2020, and through some mystic alignment of the stars, he was actually right. Rocket League went both free-to-play and jumped ship from Steam to the Epic Game Store on September 23rd, and it's been pretty smooth sailing ever since. Now, the game is as popular as ever, bringing a whole new legion of fans, including, if you've watched our stream, you know that I might be a little addicted to this game as well. Now, Psyonix continues to pump out new seasons and new content without missing a beat, to the point that we're almost a little surprised they haven't critically messed something up along the way. Rocket League just seems to be one of those kinds of games that everybody loves if they play it, or is, at worst, indifferent to it if they don't. And in these days, maybe that's about the best you could actually hope for. Number 8. Hearthstone players riot over the game's new progression system. Several years ago, Jason opined that something akin to a battle pass system might be a good idea for virtually any free-to-play game. Now, in doing so, he also said it needs to be done right, though, not like Star Wars: The Old Republic and how they did it. That game had just implemented at the time its Galactic Command system, which largely replaced the old ways of collecting loot. And its thorough rejection of players should have served as a strong warning to future developers that if you go this route, crunch your numbers rigorously and make sure you get it right. But Blizzard didn't seem to get that memo. When Hearthstone changed up its progression system, many of the same issues that plagued BioWare 4 years ago resurfaced. The rewards were too small, the work for them was too much, and, worst of all, the developers, quote, lied about how it wouldn't be that way. Now, we think there was a little less about trying to be deceptive here and more about simply just screwing up, but the perception was out there. And as we write this in mid-December, the fur does seem to be dying down a bit. Every Reddit thread isn't some meme about greedy Blizzard or I've played for years but now I'm quitting. But still, the rage was very real, and Blizzard's attempts so far to appease fans have really been met with minimal success. It's probably the biggest collective tantrum we've seen regarding a game's progression since the Star Wars Battlefront 2 fiasco, and that game recovered decently, but effectively giving in to every concern that players had, and if Blizzard wants the same for Hearthstone, it's going to have to make similar sweeping changes. Number 7. Riot launches its first post-League of Legends game. One last time for anyone who hasn't heard the joke yet, 2020 was the year League of Legends creators put the games into Riot Games. Not content just to launch one title in the new year, Riot sent forth into the wild a pair of titles, League-inspired card game Legends of Runeterra and competitive shooter Valorant. Both games have shown themselves to be successful, no guarantee for even a company as storied as Riot is, though fortuitous timing might have played into both. Two of their major competitors, both created by Blizzard, seem to be on the downswing. Hearthstone, as we talked about earlier, and Overwatch, which has a sequel coming soon but received only one new hero and no new maps in 2020. And they lost several pro players to Valorant. In addition to these two titles, League's mobile version, Wild Rift, is in beta, and there's still Project L, a fighting game using League of Legends characters waiting in the wings. It's going to be a busy decade for Riot Games, especially since we've just seen that Riot's Greg Ghostcrawler Street announced that the company was working on a League of Legends MMO, adding another big title to its slate of upcoming games. Number 6. Crucible launches, unlaunches, then shuts down. When Amazon Game Studios made a big splash with multiple game announcements 4 years ago, it was kind of hard not to be excited. Here was a new AAA studio set to launch 3 new titles over the next few years, an arena battler, a battle royale, and an MMORPG. With the big names they were bringing on and the big budget they were clearly playing with, it seemed like success was all but guaranteed. Now, the first of those 3 games, Breakaway, came and went with barely a whimper. Still, as many have said before, making games is hard, so one failure shouldn't be too difficult to absorb, right? Besides, there were still 2 more games in development, and surely they would be hits. The second game, Crucible, finally showed up in May, and it's hard to imagine a bigger disaster. It launched with about a month's notice, surprising everyone, including press, and its initial reveal, both Steam page and its introductory video, were very amateurish. The gameplay was alright, if not spectacular, but 2 of the 3 game modes were quickly scrubbed from the game, leaving just one, albeit the best of the 3, to carry the load. Even then, the developers acknowledged that there was still work to be done, and Amazon made the unprecedented choice to unlaunch Crucible, taking the game back to a closed beta state. Even that recommitment to testing and perfecting the formula wasn't enough, though, as Amazon announced the game shut down in October and now pins all its hopes on the MMORPG New World, which was delayed from its scheduled launch in August to 2021. That was undoubtedly a wise move, though, but even with a few other fingers in other companies' pies like Athlon's Lord of the Rings game and Smilegate's Lost Ark, New World really needs to be a hit if anyone's going to have confidence in Amazon Game Studios going forward. Number 5. Genshin makes a big impact. If we're going to be perfectly honest, when we learned about Genshin Impact back in January, we thought, it looks cute, but it's just another MMO, whatever. Even leading up to its beta launch, there was virtually no hype surrounding the game. It looked to be just another anime-inspired title that would have a few dedicated fans, but not make any major, impact. We were more than a little wrong here. A major success right out of the gate, it took 2 weeks for Genshin Impact to recoup its development costs, and after just a month, MiHoYo had brought in $250 million. The primary source of that money is the game's loot boxes, which have drawn their detractors but seem to be less contentious than in most other games. or maybe people are just willing to overlook them because of how well the game plays in general with its Zelda Breath of the Wild style graphics, combat, and puzzles. Now, whatever the case, Genshin Impact was clearly the surprise free-to-play hit of 2020 in a year where several games like Fall Guys and Phasmophobia came out of nowhere and became huge overnight successes. It's almost enough to make the cynical among us believe that we can still be pleasantly surprised by the unexpected in the world of gaming. Number 4. Phantasy Star Online 2 finally launches in the West. After 8 years of waiting and endlessly teasing fans, Sega finally brought Phantasy Star Online 2 to the Americas and Europe. That was the good news. And the good vibes lasted for about a month after its launch on the Xbox One. Then came the PC launch, which was handled via the Windows Store initially and went about as poorly as a game launch could. The entire process was rife with errors that led to many using alternate emulators to get a playable game up and running on their computers, waiting until the Steam launch, which did come in early August, or simply giving up on the game altogether. Then to further complicate matters, Sega announced that a new edition of the game, Phantasy Star Online 2 New Genesis, would be dropping in 2021. This version would improve graphics and game systems, but would not allow you to carry progress over from the current version, leading us to wonder why Sega didn't just wait one more year and present this new and improved version of the game. Still, for those like myself who'd waited years to play the game, at least with translations for their native country, official translations, PSO2's Western launch was a godsend. It's very much a product of its time and place of origin with plenty of grinding to spare, but for those willing to try it on its merits, it is a fantastic pastime. Number 3. Daybreak Game Company purchased by EG7. A late entry into this year's list, but without a doubt one of the biggest stories of the year, was the acquisition of Daybreak Game Company by Swedish developer Enid Global 7. The deal, which carried a price of $300 million, is notable not only on its own merits, but also for what it ended up revealing about Daybreak. EG7 released an investor presentation alongside the notice of the sale, and it laid bare several details about the business side of Daybreak and its constituent games. Daybreak games have just over 400,000 monthly users, and its most successful moneymaker is actually DC Universe Online. Oh, and the company has a license to produce a Marvel game. Oh, and it purchased Standing Stone Games back in 2016. They weren't just publishing for them. The sale heralded the possibility of an updated version of DC Universe Online and The Lord of the Rings Online, while also fueling speculation that there could be something new coming down the road for EverQuest's fans. That would be welcome news for a company that once had the biggest franchise in all of the MMORPG world, but has seen its customer base dwindle. EverQuest in 2003 had more players than all of Daybreak's titles in 2020 combined. Number 2. Epic Games takes on Apple. When talking about a back-and-forth game, sports announcers often use the analogy of a heavyweight boxing match, two big guys trading haymakers or something similar. Gamers got to experience that this year as a couple of companies with more capital than you or I could accumulate in a century duked it out in public, with one aiming to make more money while branding itself as a modern-day freedom fighter, and the other looking to hold on to the gobs of money it already was making. It would have been hard to choose a side in that duel, but Epic Games did give it a shot. It started when Fortnite showed up on the App Store with a direct payment option that bypassed Apple's fees for using the store. Apple predictably responded by booting Fortnite from the store, and Epic countered just a mere hours later with a pre-planned public campaign railing against Apple's terms that included a parody of Apple's classic 1984 ad for Macintosh computers. The two companies butted heads in real courts, as well as the court of public opinion, for the rest of the year. Epic called Apple a monopolist, while Apple called Epic's efforts part of a marketing campaign. Nothing was formally resolved in 2020, and the case is set to be heard before a jury in the summer of 2021. Now, that verdict could have long-reaching consequences, not only for those two companies, but for anyone selling products on a mobile device. That's Epic's stated aim: to level the playing field for smaller devs that can't afford to take on Apple on their own. Of course, it will also financially benefit Epic from a ruling in their favor, and its readiness with a public relations campaign, including in-game events, immediately after its calculated breach of the App Store's terms. They do all have a cynical air to them, and that was before Tim Sweeney equated Epic's fight to the civil rights movement. Then again, there's something to be said for breaking down the walled garden that Apple has erected for itself on the App Store, so maybe we should be rooting for Epic? It's also entirely conceivable that they're just no good guys in this fight, and it's just a couple of huge companies fighting over their billions. In that case, the real winners might just be the lawyers on either side, who are guaranteed to rack up a pretty penny in fees for their services. Number 1. COVID-19 impacts the gaming industry and the rest of the world. In late January, we received word that a couple of esports events in China were being put on hold due to concerns stemming from the outbreak of the novel coronavirus in that country. A few weeks later, Conqueror's Blade developer Booming Games, based out of Hangzhou, said that it was delaying its next content drop because of the virus. I remember thinking back then and saying so much on the Free-to-Play cast that it was kind of understandable that such actions be taken, but this would only be a blip on the radar of the world and the gaming industry, says Jason Winter of MMOBomb.com. There would be some more delays and a few unfortunate deaths, but life in general would go on, perhaps with only a minor and brief disruption to our overall way of life. And as predictions go, that may be Jason's worst ever. Now, we won't bother with a lengthy description of everything that's happened this year because of COVID-19, because you probably already know that. In our little free-to-play corner of the world, though, it's been the stated reason for delays of the launches of various games and their updates, as well as the cancellations of their live events for nearly the last 11 months. And if we tried to link every single one of those articles into an article, well, the article that we would write would be nothing but a sea of blue and purple or whatever color it shows up in your browser. A search for COVID in our articles on mmobomb.com brings up about 56 results by itself. The long-term effects of COVID on people's health is still unknown. What does seem more likely to be true is that the disease will affect how businesses operate, including game developers. Square Enix has already made working from home permanent, and we would expect several other companies to follow suit in the coming months, or at least offer more options for doing so, especially if upper-class talent stand firm and refuse to go to an office. For us at mmobomb.com and gamers in general, that means that game development will probably be a bit slower as companies adjust to the new normal. No matter how well managed you are, coordinating something as complex as a video game with potentially hundreds or thousands of contributors is a difficult enough task when you can gather people together. It becomes even more difficult when they're spread out across a city, a state, or even a country. We don't think that's necessarily a bad thing, since there are still plenty of options out there to keep you entertained unless you're a one-game gamer, which would seem to be a dying breed with new big releases seemingly being released every other week. As we record this, closing out December of 2020, the United States is averaging about 3,000 deaths per day from COVID-19, and a vaccine is in early stages of distribution, but numbers are expected to stay that high or maybe even get a little worse for at least the next 2 to 3 months. And most of us are fortunate enough to have been minimally impacted by it all, working from home and spending very little time per week in the presence of people outside our homes. So while we're at low risk to catch the disease, we do know that others aren't so lucky. So we hope we'll all still be around to play all those delayed games when they finally do come out. Now that's it, gang. That is our top 10 news stories in the free-to-play world for 2020 video form. If you'd like to read the article itself, the link is in the description below. Of course, we'll be coming out with our predictions article as well, so make sure you chime in on that. And head on over to twitch.tv/MMOBomb to follow us for our daily live streams and our free-to-play cast, which we now record live on Fridays at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. Of course, we'll be giving our predictions on that show and reviewing last year's predictions to see how well we did. So if you want to get in on the fun of making fun of us or putting your own predictions up there for us to make fun of, head on over and leave your comments there. Until next time, gang, this is Mike Byrne from MMOBomb.com for the entire team behind the scenes saying Happy New Year, stay safe, and we'll see you on the servers.